Hello, my name is Jalen Stutzman.
My name is April Schleek.
My name is Ruth Nicholson.
And I serve with MAF in Angola.
Prairie Aviation Training Center.
With MAF in Uganda.
I love God, I love people, and I love flying.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Limitless. We're so happy you could join us tonight for this new installment of this series. It's something that I'm really passionate about, talking about the ministries that women hold within MAF. And I'm excited to share 3 incredible news stories with you tonight from 3 inspiring women. And I hope you're as inspired by them as we have been listening to them. My name is Chandra Eager. I'm going to be your host for this evening. My family served overseas with MAF in Uganda for 6 years before we returned home to Canada a few years ago. And I feel really blessed to have been able to stay on with MAF Canada and to be able to work and collect and feature stories from the field to share with you. If this is the first time you're joining us for a live event, please notice that there's a Q&A box in the bottom corner. Feel free to type in any questions, and we'll have a Q&A period at the end with myself and April Schleek, who will be able to answer your questions live. Our recruiting manager, unfortunately, is not feeling well tonight, but if you do have any questions about that, please put your email in the box and let us know, and we will make sure we respond to those later too. When we think about women in missions, we often think about names like Elizabeth Elliot or Corrie ten Boom, but I think that, you know, there are still amazing stories like that happening today. In MAF, the images we often see are of the airplane arriving, people rejoicing, and but there are a lot of incredible women on the field too who are working in quieter service or behind the scenes ministries. In addition, only 4.9% of commercially employed pilots are in Canada are women. And similarly, within MAF, a small percentage of our technical roles are filled by females. But the impact of women in these technical roles goes beyond just pilots or aircraft mechanics. Women working in aviation roles within MAF can help change stigmas and truly lead by example in the places that we serve. Um, if you weren't able to join us for a previous Limitless, all of our interviews from before tonight are available on our website. We will put that link in the chat box for you guys as well. Also, one other thing to note as we get ready to be introduced to our first speaker tonight is that sometimes in communicating with people living in developing countries, the internet connection doesn't hold very well. So you will notice a few glitches here and there with some of our ladies speaking from overseas. Please just be patient. It's part of the difficulty in holding a connection in their remote locations. Our first speaker tonight is Ruth Nicholson. Ruth spent her first 17 years as a missionary kid in Ethiopia, and her parents served there with SIM. After she went to college in the USA, she felt a calling in serving the Lord overseas and returned to Ethiopia as a teacher. She met her husband Ruth there, and her husband Larry there, and they married in 1986, and then moved on to serve in Papua New Guinea, and they have been serving with MAF now for over 35 years. In 2018, the Nicholsons relocated to Uganda to offer support to the MAF engineering team in Africa. Ruth serves there now as the visitor coordinator, offering hospitality and a sense of home to whoever she meets or whoever passes through the program there. If you'd like to learn more about Ruth after you hear her story tonight, we will put a link in the chat box for you guys so you can learn how you can support her or follow along with her ministry. And without further ado, please give a warm welcome to Ruth Nicholson.
My name is Ruth Nicholson, and my husband Larry and I currently serve with MAF in Uganda. We have 5 grown children and 3 grandchildren, and we feel so blessed to have 3 of our children living and working near us here in Uganda and Ethiopia. So it's pretty special for us to have our kids following us around the world at the moment. Not what we had planned, but we're really grateful for that. Both my husband and I come from missionary families. I grew up in Ethiopia and he grew up in Papua New Guinea. So even though neither of our parents were serving with MAF, our families did fly on MAF planes. So even at a young age, we both knew about MAF and had great respect for the MAF pilots. And I feel very blessed to have been raised in a Christian home and to have lived mission life firsthand. But when I was 15, I realized that my faith had to become my own, not just my parents'. And it was at that time that I dedicated my life to obeying God and going where he was telling me to go and doing what he wanted me to do. Larry felt led to use his aviation training and skills for mission work. So in 1984, he went to Ethiopia to serve as a pilot and engineer with MAF. And at the same time, after attending university, I also returned to Ethiopia as a teacher. So we met there and we were married there in Ethiopia. And then pretty much straight away, we moved to Papua New Guinea, where we served with MAF until moving to Uganda in 2018. Now, because I grew up surrounded by missionaries, I never gave much thought to what the word missionary actually meant. It was just part of our life, and we didn't know anything else, I guess, as kids. But I think now when people hear the word missionary today, they picture someone who has left the familiarity of their own country and culture and gone to a place that is unfamiliar, stepping out into the unknown, obeying God because that is where he's told them to go, even though it might be scary and very unfamiliar. But to join God in his work that he's doing there and just following and obeying him. But I think missionaries are just normal, ordinary people that are following God's leading. Since my husband had already joined MAF before we were married, we decided that we wanted to continue our involvement with them after getting married. So we were especially inspired and passionate about the work that MAF was doing in Papua New Guinea at the time. And also since Larry had grown up there, he was quite keen to go back there to work and join MAF in the work that they were doing there. And MAF is still serving people in the most remote villages there by supporting those who are providing medical care, education, and spiritual leadership. So having grown up overseas in a third world country, I had seen firsthand and understood the great need that there is to show the love of God to isolated people. And MAF's vision is to do just that. So I think that's what inspired us both to continue working with MAF, and for me joining him, is that MAF's vision is to reach isolated people, and we both really felt called and wanted to do that. So it was an easy decision to transition into MAF, at least for me, from the other mission that I had been serving with, because MAF was already doing what I wanted to do. When we first went to New Guinea, I was newly married. And so for the first several years there, I was teaching. But once I started having children, I put teaching on hold and slotted into some different roles within MAF. My primary focus was being a wife and mom to our growing family. But I also kept very busy helping new MAF families to settle in well and orientating them to what had them as they adjusted to many unfamiliar things. And over the 30 plus years that we were in New Guinea, I think we saw more than 200, that's a large number, 200 various families coming and going through the program. So lots of orientating of new families, but I really enjoyed it and loved getting alongside, especially the moms who were new to the country and the culture, and just trying to help them settle in well and make it a good experience for them. Our family lived in a town, but many of the MAF families were based in very remote locations and villages with no way to get supplies. So one of my main roles there for many years was to do a weekly shop of fresh produce and other groceries and package it all up and send it to them. And it was so needed and so appreciated by the families. So that was a big role of living in the town and just supporting the missionaries out in the villages. Within our local community in the town where we lived, there was plenty of opportunity to get involved, like Sunday school teaching and leading women's Bible studies, but that wasn't really my primary, that's not what took up most of my time. It was more supporting the mission families, not only MAF families, but other missionaries that were living remotely. Joining MAF and moving to Papua New Guinea seemed pretty straightforward to me, maybe partly because I had lived grown up overseas and lived in Ethiopia for a couple years before we moved to New Guinea. The journey has been exciting and so rewarding, but also stretching in many ways. We had some incredibly challenging times during our years in New Guinea, both health-wise, security-wise, and different incidences. But God used them to help me grow, and my faith and trust in Him definitely has been made stronger through those stretching times. God never promised us an easy road with no difficulties. So I can honestly say that I am glad to experience these stretching times because of where it has brought me in my walk with Him. The other thing that has kept me motivated for all these years is my passion for what MAF is doing and the way that God is using MAF to make a difference in the lives of so many people around the world. I always get a feeling of pride and joy when I see the MAF planes flying overhead, and I think of those pilots and what they've given up to come and serve in the remote communities. And it always often brought tears to my eyes just to see those MAF planes flying overhead. And I felt so proud to be part of this organization and part of the work that the way God was using MAF to minister to the people in the remote communities. So that has motivated me, is just my passion for what MAF is doing. I think that I would say the most impactful, or maybe I would say the most rewarding time for me as a missionary was the 5 years that we had 12 high school kids living with us in our large house, or hostel as it was called. And this was in Papua New Guinea when we still had our kids with us, and they were teenagers as well. I love getting news from those kids now about their marriages and their own children. And I just feel so grateful and humbled that I had the opportunity and was able to have an input into all of these kids' lives. And I felt like by caring for these kids as they attended the high school there, the parents were able to continue in the work that God had called them to do, whether it was being a doctor in a hospital in a remote village, or translating the Bible in the language of the remote villagers. Whatever it was that the parents of these kids were doing, I felt like I had a small part in that work. In 2018, after more than 30 years in Papua New Guinea, MAF management asked if we would move to Uganda to support the engineering teams here in East Africa. And to be honest, it was difficult for me to leave the place where I had lived my whole married life and the country where I had raised my family. And I was apprehensive about leaving my friends and the ministries I had been involved in. And I wondered, what in the world am I going to be doing in Uganda? But I learned that becoming involved in ministry doesn't always happen immediately when you move to a new place, and that's okay. You don't need to jump into activities and ministries that you see all the other missionaries doing, because that might not be what God is wanting you to do. And I found that I needed to wait on God's timing and direction before jumping in. And sometimes He has plans for us that have nothing to do with our training or what we think we're good at even. But if you follow Him in trust and obedience, He will use you in ways that you never dreamt of. And options for involvement are limitless, and God will show you the needs around you, show you what He wants you to do, and give you the ability and provide for you what you need to be able to do those things. Anyway, the opportunity opened for me to take on the role of visitor coordinator for MAF Uganda. And this involves basically all the logistics for people coming and going to the Uganda program. Right now, there's a lot of training that takes place here. Pilots from all over the world who have joined MAF recently come here to learn the procedures for new aircraft and the new standards for MAF. So we have a lot of visitors coming through, and even other, not necessarily pilots, but people from other MAF programs come for audits, story gathering, and we have a lot of interns as well, young interns coming from various countries to spend 6 months with us. So these guys are like 18 or 19 years old and learning what MAF is about, and mainly working in the engineering department. So it's nice to have all of them come. So basically my job is arranging airport shuttles and accommodation, meals, schedules for their meetings, COVID tests to enter the country and to leave the country, and transport. And that's just part of, small part of the job. So making the visitors feel welcomed and comfortable, I feel, enables them to better carry out the tasks that they came here to do. So the less that they have to worry about, the more effective they can be. As well as coordinating these things, I manage the guest house, a small MAF guest house, and I enjoy making it a comfortable place so that the visitors can feel like it's their home away from home. And also including the young interns who come, they can sometimes get homesick, so having them over and just making them feel welcomed and that this is their new place for 6 months, I think really helps them in their learning and what they came to do as well. So just making a living and a studying space that is taken care of for the pilots and for the interns can help them accomplish their goals better. So that's my primary role here in Uganda at the moment. So I feel privileged and grateful that I can be involved in different types of ministries, both within MAF and in the community as well. So I've also been involved in teaching cooking classes and sewing lessons to some of the local girls and ladies in my community right around where I live here. And it brings me great satisfaction to see the joy on their faces when they've learned something new. And I would love to see it, like planting the seed and seeing it go further I hope they can use their newly acquired skills to generate income for their families and support their own communities. And hopefully they in turn can teach these cooking and sewing skills to their families and friends and just keep it going. So that's just another small ministry that I'm involved in just with my neighbors here. And I would love to see it kind of have a ripple effect into their communities as well. I think the role that I'm doing in MAF, which is kind of behind the scenes and not frontline at all, are important because they kind of maybe give a foundation or a backbone to what is happening on the front lines. If some of these logistical things aren't taken care of and they kind of all fall apart, then it has a kind of a domino effect, I think, on the effectiveness of what the visitors or whoever's coming here, on their effectiveness and what they're supposed to do. So I think without that kind of structure or support, it makes the task of what they're coming to do a lot harder. So yeah, I'm happy to be involved in it and be behind the scenes. I don't mind being behind the scenes, but I think it is an important role in that way, just to help the frontline things happen. When someone asks me what I'm passionate about, I had never really thought about it much or put it into words, but having now looked back at all the different things that I've had the privilege of doing and that God has given me to do on the mission field, I can see clearly that my passion is for other missionaries, enabling them, encouraging, empowering them to be able to do their job well, whether it be helping new MAF pilots when they come for training, or supporting new missionaries as they navigate living in an unfamiliar culture, helping their families, looking after teenagers or interns that come here for 6 months at a time. Yeah, I'm passionate about just helping other missionaries, spoiling them when they come to the city for shopping and helping them in practical ways. I feel like it helps them feel renewed and rejuvenated to go back to their villages and do the ministry that God has called them to do. And I think it's really important to convey to the missionaries that they're loved and valued, and that the work that they're doing and their faithfulness to God's calling doesn't go unnoticed. They are reaching people in the isolated communities, and because I support them, I'm also reaching those people in the isolated communities. I don't have to be on the front lines to be making a difference. I hope that what I do trickles way down the line into the lives of those people in a humble village, thus fulfilling MAF's vision, really, reaching those in isolated communities. So the one thing I have found in all my work is that I always get way more out of it than I put in. The rewards bring such joy, and that makes the service seem easy. So we in MAF do serve a great God, and we want all people to see him in all that we're doing.
Thank you, Ruth. And I had the honor and the privilege of working alongside of Ruth in Uganda. And she really is an inspiration to everyone who she ministers to, the people who stay in her house. And, she became like a second mom to a lot of our interns. And it's really humbling to be able to hear her talk about her years of service with MAF and all of the people whose lives she's touched along the way and what she does. Our next guest is April Schleek. She is joining us live tonight after for the Q&A, but I would like to take a minute to introduce her before we hear from her. April became interested in mission aviation when a missions pilot shared about the ministry at a conference she attended. She was put in touch with MAF, and after completing her aviation training at Prairie Bible College, she joined the flight instructing staff there. In 2012, April was accepted with MAF Canada as a pilot and flight instructor and was assigned to a partner organization. She served there for 3 years as the chief flight instructor. Now, Back in Canada, April is enjoying flight instructing at PATC, where she not only teaches the students how to fly, she more importantly challenges and encourages them in their walk with the Lord. Again, at the end of April's segment, we will pop her link into the chat box, so you'll be able to find out more information on how you can follow her or support her. And a reminder to pop any questions you have for April into the chat box, and we'll make sure we answer them at the end. So without further ado, please welcome April Schleek.
Hi, my name is April Schleek, and I am a pilot and flight instructor with Mission Aviation Fellowship. I'm based at Prairie Aviation Training Center in Three Hills, Alberta. I'm originally from Southern Ontario. I grew up in a family of 5 in total. I'm the middle person, the middle child. We grew up going to church, and I became a believer when I was 5 years old. And I wanted to serve the Lord in whatever capacity I could. I was interested in missions, but I knew at the time, my understanding was that there was really only 3 jobs. It was nursing, being a doctor, or being a pastor. And I wasn't really interested in those options. And in high school, I became interested in aviation. And then one day, I went to a missions conference with the churches that were associated with the one that I went to. It was this tiny, tiny missions conference. There was probably 50 people there. And one of the speakers was this guy who turns out was this pilot that flew overseas in Papua New Guinea. And he was talking about his role as a mission pilot. And I had never heard of this concept before, that you could serve the Lord overseas in an aviation environment. And so I just really felt like it was all of the bits of the things that I got excited about, that I was passionate about, of people and God and serving others. And it was like a light was like, whoa, sitting there in my chair of like, maybe this could be something where all of my passions come together. That following year, I packed up and moved out to Three Hills, Alberta. Massive shock because it's a very small town, and you can see the edge of town. So it was a little surprising. And I did the program there. Now, the program was expensive at the time, and it is now too, but I flew and I did 2 years of Bible, and then I ran out of money. So I had my private license and a 2-year Bible degree. And so then I went home and I worked for 2 more years, and then came back and flew a little, and then worked for 2 years, and I came back and flew a little, and finished it up in 2007. When I came back, that last time, I was able to get a job as a flight instructor here. So I finished my commercial license, got my instructor rating, and then started on staff at in the Mission Aviation program. And then I joined MAF and was sent overseas for 3 years and flew over there, and then came back in a few years ago now, and was given the opportunity to work again here at Prairie Aviation Training Center. And so I was really excited. My view of the word missionary has changed over the years. When I was younger, I would have thought that it was like a specific person doing a specific job, in that their whole job was being a missionary. I really don't believe that now. A missionary is someone who is a believer and wants to share the good news with other people. And I think that anyone who is a believer automatically is a missionary. The thing that inspired me to become part of MEF is I really like the work that they do. After kind of at the end of my training, I had an opportunity to go on a vision trip to Papua New Guinea to check out what, like, the operations of MEF and what they do on a day-to-day basis. But for a period of time, we were in one of the bush bases where there was a pilot and a plane with MAF and a hospital, and we spent most of the week there, and we really felt like, could see how isolating it is and how groceries had to be flown in for the families that were living there, and just all sorts of stuff. And what I really liked about MAF was that they weren't tied to one denomination. They were helping everybody, and they helped all of the missionaries. And later on, when I was an instructor at the school here, I took a team back over to PNG so they could experience just life over there with MEF as well. We were able to do a lot of ride-alongs at that time, and I rode along in the Twin Otter, and we were moving food into the villages and education supplies and coffee. They would bring coffee out of the villages so they could sell it at markets, so they could get money to pay school fees so their kids could get an education. So some of the things in MAF you see like the direct link to, and then there's other things it's like these things have to happen so these other big things happen. I've had some really good encouragers along the way. My instructor here from a few times coming back and forth, he is an MEF pilot, and he was extremely encouraging to me, saying that those people that faced a lot of challenges and it took a long time to get to the field often would stay with MEF for a long time, because if it was really easy, then when you get overseas and find that it's really hard, then you really just don't have that kind of perseverance to stick with it, even during really difficult situations. It just was like the Lord was really building in perseverance to get to the goal. There have been challenges. There are not a lot of female pilots in mission aviation. I didn't have anyone that I was like looking up to of like, yes, I want to be like this woman. About halfway through in 2005 to 2007, I actually burned out and was taking a while to recover. I did not fly during that time. And I was at this crisis point of, do I continue this or not? I was at home and I was thinking about coming back to finish up, and I was still short money. I had applied to the MEF scholarship, like MEF had a scholarship. I applied for that. I didn't really qualify, in my opinion, but I did it anyways, because they wanted to know how you were going to be involved in the community and all that kind of stuff. But I had been burnt out, and so I wasn't involved in the community. I wasn't doing extracurricular things. Anyways, so I wrote this essay on, I love God, I love people, and I love flying. Who knew this was going to be so hard? And then one day, the MAF Flying magazine came in to our mail, and on the front page, there was a woman, Debbie Leninga, who was flying with MAF in Papua New Guinea. And her last name is like Lanigna, I believe. And my maiden name is Lanigan, Lanigan. And I'm like, what? This is crazy. Like, finally, there is a woman that is flying with MAF. And she's in PNG, and like, this is wonderful. And so that day I like went out into the city to do some stuff. And as I'm coming back, I'm just like, also just like thinking, should I continue this? Like, should I continue this or not? Because maybe, just maybe, I'm just being stubborn, and I'm not following what the Lord has for me. And I asked him, could you please just make it super clear if I need to stay on this path or not? And so I got home, and there was a message on the machine. I'm just making calls about the scholarship. There was a lot of good applicants, but not everyone was able to get it. But I wanted to let you know that you've been selected as one of the scholarship recipients. And he's like, we just really wanted to encourage you to stay on this path. And maybe one day we would see you here, like serving overseas with an organization like MAF. And I could not believe it. It was like the same words that I prayed. Like 15 minutes later, this guy's telling me from MAF that to encourage me to stay on this path. The most impactful time at Prairie isn't just a particular moment in time. It's the work that we get to do on a daily basis. So I get to come alongside students who are from all backgrounds, all different countries, and not only teach them how to fly airplanes in a professional and excellent way, but also come alongside them as they struggle, not only to perform a specific maneuver, but in their discouragements and as they try to decipher what the Lord has for them. And really, that is my favorite bit of the job. Instructing really creates this atmosphere when those kind of conversations can happen. The students that we get, most of them are straight out of high school. So they're still growing, they're still maturing. So we get to be a part of training them up as adults and believers, and they have dreams. They're still in the dreams stage. I really actually enjoy working with the students that are really struggling in some way in their training, because they know that they need the Lord to help them in that time. Just from like the experience of what the Lord has helped me come through, and I'm just eager to share that with those people that are also dealing with different things. And for another female that's wanting to do this, go into mission aviation, my advice, I would have a few advices. One, be yourself. don't feel like you have to take on a different persona as a female pilot. It is a very male-dominated world in the world of aviation, and even more so on the mission aviation side of things. But the guys out there are just like really great, and I have not had any issues whatsoever with the guys that I've interacted with in the aviation community with MAF. And so just be yourself. If you're really girly, be really girly. If you're like more tomboyish, be that. It just doesn't matter. You don't have to like make yourself be somebody you're not. So that's one thing. And then the other is, and this is not specifically to just females, this is like anybody who is wanting to be a pilot or wanting to do mission aviation, do not do it because you think it's really cool. That will wear off very quickly when you are struggling with something and you're not performing as well as you want to be, or when you get overseas and it's way harder than you thought it was going to be. If you're going to be a pilot or go overseas as a pilot, you need to dig your heels in and commit to it. I think more about being a flight instructor really helps facilitate a relationship. But as a flight instructor, there's this relationship that's like automatic, where trust is automatic because the student doesn't know how to fly and I do. And so we have this transfer of controls and we're doing not intense things, but we are like taking off and we're in the air and they are trusting me to safely land the aircraft. And when they're learning, I'm there as their safety pilot. So I think with instructing, it automatically creates this relationship. And from that kind of foundational trust relationship, then we can easily start to build on to that. So that's why I think instructing is really helpful if you really like people and affecting other people's life for Christ.
Thank you, April. Just a reminder, guys, April is here with us at the end. You don't want to miss your chance to send her through some questions. Sorry about that. April is here and she will be live with us to answer questions. So don't forget to send your questions through for her. Just pop them right in the chat box. She has amazing things to say about aviation and about serving with MAF. And yeah, it's definitely worth your while to stick around to the end and be able to chat with her live. Now, last but not least tonight, we have Jaylyn Stutzman. Jaylyn was born and raised in northern British Columbia. She became a Christian at a young age and has continued to grow in her relationship with God by serving wherever she has found herself. Before she was overseas, she worked in Bible camp, short-term missions, and for just the last year, her and her husband Andrew have been in our program in Angola. Her husband is a pilot, and Jaylyn, as a trained nurse, is working with a palliative team in Lubango and in remote areas in Angola to be able to help people at the end of their lives. So, for our last interview tonight, we will hear from Jaylyn.
Hello, my name is Jaylyn Stutzman and I serve with MAF in Angola. I grew up in northern BC in a Christian family with two brothers. I accepted Christ at a very young age through an Awana program. And I love traveling with my family. My father worked in many different cities throughout northern BC. And I was homeschooled, and so my family would travel with him wherever he would go. And now thinking back from where I am now, I see that this was one of God's ways possibly of preparing me to be a missionary, as I was used to making new friends and not living close to many extended relatives. Part of this was also that I heard lots of missionary stories. They were read to me as a child, and I had extended relatives who were serving overseas as missionaries. And I really loved these stories. And though I never at the time saw myself as being a missionary, I really enjoyed praying for them and hearing their stories. I went to Prairie Bible, again, not with the intention of being a missionary. I never thought that was going to be me. But then I met my husband, Andrew, who is a pilot with MAF. And he has been wanting to join MAF for, oh goodness, like 6 years before I met him. And he was at Prairie for that purpose. And through talking to him and hearing about his dream for mission, I also caught that dream. The word missionary for me has changed a lot over the years. When I was younger, that was my cousins and my aunts and uncles working overseas. And as I grew up, I assumed it was people and just in general who traveled to share about God overseas. And now as I think about it, and I think about myself as a missionary, and honestly, God has called all of his people to be missionaries, and I'm nothing special being here in Angola. We're supposed to be missionaries, people sharing the good news about God wherever we are with whoever is near us. So I never thought that I personally would be a missionary. That I really got excited about working for MAF and being able to tangibly share the gospel with people and help them at the same time. During Andrew's and my investigation into MAF and my own personal looks, I realized that there was no specific role presented for the spouse figure. So for myself as a non-mechanic and non-pilot, there was nothing that MAF automatically put forward and said, this is going to be your job. And as a nurse, and I've been working as a nurse in Canada at that time, and it made me really nervous to think that, I don't know, I'm going to Angola and I have no idea what I'm going to be doing there. I have no idea what God holds for me there. And it was through prayer that I realized that nursing was a gift that God had given me, and that a skill I had, and if he wanted me to use it in Angola, I would. And if he had other plans, that he would open those doors for me. And nursing was something I should be holding with loose hands and not grasping hold of. And so though I was nervous about coming to Angola, there was days that I felt God just, I guess, bolstering my courage that there was a plan for me in Angola. The first couple of months after our arrival here were difficult as I was praying and seeking God's will for me here and what he had in store and what he had planned for me. And I was very excited when nursing was something he had in store, as my very first invitation to do nursing stuff was with another nurse named Audrey Henderson, who goes out and visits tuberculosis patients. And I was able to accompany her and learn Portuguese from her and learn culture and a lot of what nursing would look like rurally in Angola. She had left on furlough just a couple of months after we got here, though. And at that point, God immediately had someone else lined up for me. And I was able to join a palliative care team that was started by a Dutch nurse and a couple of Angolan nurses here. And that's where I've been plugged in ever since. And I've been able to go on visits with them to visit some of the terminally ill and the elderly within the town, and to pray and to bring hope, but also use some of my nursing skills, which has been an honor to be able to do here. So my husband's and my journey with MAF were started in Canada with support raising. It took us 1.5 years to get from the day that we joined MAF to the field, and probably, well, I don't know, like 6 months into that, 4 months into that, the pandemic hit. And that was very difficult. We didn't know what that was going to mean for fundraising as everyone's lives around us changed. And we didn't know how long at that point it was going to take for us to actually get to Angola. But again, God is very good. And through prayer and constant reminders through other people that, you know, they had seen God bring us this far, that we knew that there was something more and that God was going to move, and he really did, as we had people we didn't even know coming forward desiring to support us in ministry, both financially and through prayer. And this was so gracious or grateful. We were so grateful for all these people as we were seeking to listen to God's calling on our lives, also listening to God's call on their heart to support a missionary, even one that they didn't know, going forward. And so it was what kept us going in these difficult times through support raising was just seeing God at work. And sometimes there would seem to be a lull where we didn't know what was going on. And then we would see God move in a great way. And through prayer and just waiting for that was what got us through. And so now being in Angola, and as I had been waiting for nursing to come forward, or something for me to do, or having a role here in Angola, one of the things that kept me going was being able to look back at the way God had provided already and the way God had moved and had brought us here. And it was so clearly his plan that we be here, that I knew that I could trust him. I could trust him with my future and whatever he was going to put in my way, that ultimately he would like his name to be glorified. And if he could use me, that would be great. With the palliative care team that I've been able to connect with, it's myself, a Dutch nurse, 3 Angolan nurses, and an Angolan pastor. And we will usually in groups of 2 or 3 go and visit the terminally ill within the city, people who need encouragement, need prayer, need extra medication and comfort care brought to them, or education about their illness, or help with the family. And so that's what we seek to do, always pointing people back to God and seeking to bring comfort ultimately through him, and that he is there for them. I love the senior population. They are precious in God's sight in a very unique way. And in at least Canadian culture, where often the seniors are put into homes and often not visited, it's wonderful to be able to visit seniors here and see a very different view of them. And here it's been really wonderful to see how families gather around their parents and their loved ones. And as a community, they work to take care of them. And so as a palliative care team member, I get to participate in that care. I get to encourage the family in what they're doing, help bring resources to them to make this care easier, as well as to continue to show love and to bring purpose to the senior or the terminally ill person's life. Sometimes it's hard to bear witness here to those struggling to survive and the suffering that's happening all around me within the city of Lubango. And most of the time, I don't know how to help. I'm not always there to help, and I can't help everyone. And even if I could, I don't always know the best way to help. And so I've been very impacted by the way I've seen the other nurses that I've been able to work with helping, and the way they've been there to touch the lives of those around me. From Audrey Henderson, the first nurse I worked with, who was the source of medication getting to the TB patients. She was the reason that they were able to get treatment. To the Dutch nurse who started the palliative care team, who she had looked around and seen a need and was able to talk to Angolans about what taking care and helping this area would help. And being able to see the way they've taken initiative and the way they have been the hands of Christ in these situations makes me super excited to see how God will continue to use me here, and the ways he will choose to bring his kingdom to earth in this way. Palliative care within Angola is a very new concept and a very important one, as we help bring comfort to people and their families as they move from this life on to eternal life. And it would be really wonderful to see our palliative care team grow with more nurses and more pastors or doctors or people skilled in just sitting and listening and talking with some of the seniors around here. And yeah, I would love to see this area of understanding of this part of life, this very important part of life, grow and expand within the community, and to raise awareness of the importance of palliative care.
Thank you, Jaylin. Jaylin was our last speaker tonight, but we do, now that we've heard from everyone, can open it up for questions. I'm available to answer questions. We have April Schleek here as well, which, like I mentioned earlier, you don't want to miss your chance to chat with April a little bit and hear more about what she has to say. And yeah, and I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for joining us. But first, let's open it up for questions. April, I have a question here that's come in for you. And people are wondering, how long is the process generally to become an MAF pilot?
Okay, well, depending on how long your training was, but generally, if you have all the money up front, it's usually a 2-year program to do your flight training. And then you graduate with about 200 hours of flight time. And then you need to go and get a job to get the rest of your experience. So normally, it's usually, I don't have the numbers right off the top of my head, but usually you need to have around 1,000 hours of experience before applying with MAF. Then you apply, and then there's a lot of stuff in that process where you do a psychological evaluation, a technical evaluation. So if you're a pilot or mechanic, you would go down to MAF US in Idaho and do a week-long technical test, a 5-day test, where they test you on like essentially everything you would need for a commercial license for flying, and for maintenance, I would assume it's just what you would normally do for your AME license. And then after that, if you pass that, then you get to move on with MAF in their process. Then you're eventually accepted, and then you do support raising. And then there's technical training again for 3 weeks of aviation, like pilot training. So you're flying with MAF standard operating and procedures. And then if you're maintenance as well, then you would do another 3 weeks of standard operating procedures. And then eventually you go. So most people, it would take, sorry, my phone's dinging. Most people, it takes several years. So maybe 5 to 10 from when you first do your training to go actually being overseas. It's possible for that to be shorter if you're able to get a flying job immediately after school and be able to gain your hours quickly. So it is possible to do it quicker. But I think generally it's like 5 to 10 years before you go overseas.
Thanks, April. I have another question for you. Yes. So you mentioned specifically in your interview that we just watched that within MAF, you know, everyone you've worked with has been great, but as a female pilot during your entire career, are there any obstacles you've had to overcome more broadly?
I think there are some older ways of thinking where women have specific roles, And when you kind of butt against that in a non-traditional role, then there's some people that might not accept you right away. But I would say that's not really the norm anymore. It was more the norm maybe 20, 25 years ago. But I think the biggest obstacle was just within myself, of if I felt like I could go and do these things, or I really wanted to fly with MEF, and maybe just like within myself trying to overcome, if you're just the different thinking patterns that you might have within yourself. So I don't think it was really external. It was just, the different things that you're, different limitations you might put on yourself.
We have one final question for you, April. And what we would like to know is, what has been your favorite memory of all your time in service with MAF?
I really enjoyed my time overseas. I can't really go into details about it because it was a restricted country, but I really, really enjoyed my time there. We were creating a program from scratch, and just getting to know the students that I was involved with, and the different government officials that we were working with. Although it was challenging at times, it was challenging a lot of times, but I just really could see the Lord working there, just like right in our face, and how the work that we were doing, although we had experience in it, I'm sorry I have to be so vague, but we had some experience in it, but we had never had to do something from scratch before. And so a lot of it was new, and we were creating and building something. And in that, we really didn't know which way to go or how to best do it in this country. And we really relied on the Lord, and we really saw him lead us at each step. And so I think that's probably my best memory. I've enjoyed all the parts of flying that I've have been able to do, and instructing here as well, all the times I've instructed here. But that time overseas was really special.
Thanks, April. I can say from personal experience that time overseas is really special. You get to see God move in a lot of ways that you don't necessarily see when you're at home and when you're taken out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us tonight. We're really happy to have you here. We loved hearing from you. April's link is in our chat box if you want to hear more about her, or support her, or follow along with what she's doing. You can find more information about her there. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for joining us tonight. A huge thank you to our panelists and to our participants and our attendees. In our next upcoming installment of Limitless, we'll have a very special guest to share with you all. We will be sharing more about who that is and what we'll be talking about closer to the date. But please stay tuned, follow us on our social media channels, and we will keep you up to date. Again, thank you very much for joining us tonight. We were glad to be with you. See you next time.